It's all about the process, step by step. Today, you can start successfully in your business by using a proven process that works. Welcome to the Start Successfully podcast, where veteran entrepreneur Gabe Arnold shares his proven step-by-step process, the process you need to start successfully in any business. And now, here's your host, Gabe Arnold.
All right, welcome to the show here. This is episode 3 of the Start Successfully podcast, and I'm super excited that you decided to listen today. Wherever you're at, you're working out, driving, taking a walk, doing something like that, or just sitting at home and relaxing. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I hope that what we have to share with you today will be valuable and helpful to you and really help you start out successfully. Today I'm really excited because we have a special guest with us. It's actually our first guest on the show, which is cool. Jeffrey Stevens. He started a business called Jeffrey's Words, and he has a really interesting backstory and he and I kind of have a very interesting path together as well. And what I'm going to share with you is one of the rarest things that I've actually ever had in my entrepreneurial journey, and how that worked out, how Jeffrey ties into that. And I think you'll find it very interesting, and there's a lot to learn. And he's a really, really smart, interesting guy that I have a pleasure of working with now. And I'm going to share with you a little bit more about that story, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to pick up some of the great things that he did to start successfully. He's also going to share some of his stories, some of the things he's learned over the years as well. So we'll get right to that right after the break.
This episode is brought to you by Copywriter Today. With Copywriter Today, you get a team of dedicated writers working for you on your content marketing needs. Get your email marketing, blog posting, white paper, sales copy, lead magnets, and so much more, written by professional writers that really understand how to drive your business. Copywriter Today is a one-stop solution, a subscription-based service with a low monthly cost. To get started now with a special offer just for you, visit copywritertoday.com/start successfully. That's copywritertoday.com/start successfully.
So, as usual, I always like to share with you guys a quote. I have a lot of quotes written down in my office and use them quite a bit, and like to post them on Facebook and share them because they mean something to me, and they help me think a lot about how I view the world and how I should be viewing the world and what I should be doing. So here you go. It's happiness cannot be traveled to, owned, earned, worn, or consumed. Happiness is the spiritual experience of living every minute with love, grace, and gratitude. Dennis Waitley. And he's a best-selling author, has a bunch of really interesting books that you should check out as well. You can find those on Amazon. And that quote really reminds me of some of what I'm going to share with you. As always, I'm going to share a little bit of story about my past here. And then I think it also applies a lot to when we bring Jeffrey on here, what we'll be talking about with him as well. And just kind of some things that we can learn and apply there. And I'll just share with how I've applied them as well. So years ago, I actually had a construction company, and for a few years did very well with it. Honestly, looking back, just kind of out of dumb luck. But it was before the housing market crash of the early 2000s, around the 2005 to 2007 range. There is when everything kind of popped and burst. And during that period, right before that period, I had built a large construction company, and we were doing a few $1 million a year, and it was going very well, in my opinion. But I was young and dumb at that point. And what happened very quickly was, as the housing market began to burst, I had a couple customers that ended up having their credit lines dry up, and I had other issues come up, and I ended up getting stuck for about $250,000. And in the matter of 90 days, everything disintegrated for me. And I remember being in the process of trying to figure out what to do with all this money that I owed and all these credit lines that I had and all these trades that had worked for me, because I had about 40 employees, and then I had about 30 to 35 subcontractor individuals and subcontracting companies. And one of the subcontractors that I had was a guy named Mike, and he had a large electrical company that worked with my construction company. And over the course of the 6 months or so leading up to this point, I had racked up a balance with him of about $40,000. And with getting stuck for that money, that was snowballed, and caused me to really be, struggling, and it ultimately put me out of business, and I closed the doors. But during that period, I was trying to figure out how I could turn the business around, if I could save it, what I could do. And it was towards the end of the period before I decided to close the business that I went up to Mike's house. I had given him a call and said, hey, I need to meet with you and share with you what's going on. I got some stuff going on I need to run by you, because I'd worked with Mike for quite a few years at that point. So I drove up to Mike's house, pulled in his driveway, and sat down, and I said, here's what happened to me. I got stuck for this money through the course of some bad events, and I don't know how I'm going to pay you within the next, 3 or 4 months. I'm going to have to find a way to make some sort of payment plan and see if I can pay you over the course of a year or two. And Mike looked up at me and he said, you know what, Gabe, bad things like this happen. And he's like, don't worry about it. He's like, maybe in the future, if you're able to do something with it, that's fine. He's like, bad things happen to all of us in business. And he said, from looking at your situation, everything, looks like you're in a pretty rough spot. And so he said, don't worry about the debt. That was, I just sat there stunned for a minute, because that's not what you expect people to hear when you owe them $40,000. I had other people in that situation threaten to kill me, other vendors and creditors that I owed. But right in that moment, I experienced probably the most amazing amount of grace and forgiveness and undue grace, that I ever imagined could happen. And it really stuck with me, even in the midst of a really difficult, next few years, getting through closing a business, getting divorced, having my grandfather and my best friend die in a few short months. There was a lot going on. It was a really, really difficult time in my life. So I wasn't reacting or acting the best, my best. I'll say that, to be honest. But I'll always remember that day when Mike sat down and he just completely forgave something that was completely my fault. And he really demonstrated grace, and forgiveness and just love to me in the time where I was really not doing well. So that's a story of, my past, of somebody that really did something amazing for me. And after I recovered, unfortunately, I have to say that I, didn't immediately pay it forward or do the right thing. I still went through a very rough period and wasn't living my best, we'll say that. But over time, even more so in that moment, that really sunk in with me. And it's something that I've tried to do when I have the opportunity to show other people grace as well. So next, I'm going to get Jeffrey on the line here, and we're going to talk about his story. And I hope that, like I said, it's something that will help you kind of learn and grow in your entrepreneurial journey. And I hope you enjoy it. So we'll get him on right now. All right. I have Jeffrey on here. And like I shared with you guys a little bit ago, he actually started a company called Jeffrey's Words that he's going to share with us how that began. But before we do that, Jeffrey, why don't you kind of just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial career and, like what you did kind of starting out, maybe some of the work you did, and then ultimately what led, you to start, getting started with working with us at Copywriter Today.
Yeah, well, for me, I got started, all the writing I did, it centered around my faith and what I believe in. So I was doing a lot of work for nonprofits, writing bulletins for a couple of churches, for a couple other groups. Writing had always been something I enjoyed, and it was always something I wanted to pursue. But all I knew about writing and making money was writing books. I wanted to be a writer, but there was no one else directly a part of my life that had ever earned an income writing. So I was lost. I emailed a couple publishers, started working on a couple books, and just lost interest. That takes a lot of time, and I just wasn't focused. I wasn't ready for anything like that. I was wanting to make money right now. I didn't want to deal with the whole process of writing a book and waiting on book sales and stuff like that. And so I just started messing around on the internet, trying to find ways to come up with money writing. I spent my entire life working for my mom in a business she owns, and I was so tired of having her name on the front of my check, I was willing to work at McDonald's. So I, you know, my family's had some success in business, but writing that was the only way I thought I had to do my own thing without a parent giving me something or working off my family's last name. That was my chance to build something up for myself.
Yeah, that's cool. And so how did you end up I've never even asked you this before, so I'm curious, did you end up just like Googling us or like writing jobs and finding us, or how did you end up finding Copywriter Today?
I found Copywriter Today. I was on Facebook and saw an ad. It said, "You love to write, you want to make money writing." And to be honest, at that point, I was about ready to give up. I started doing the content mill thing, and I think the first one I ever started writing for was freelancer.com, and there's still several people out there that owe me money through that website. So hopefully maybe one of them hear it and they're paying people. So, but you get a couple people rip you off, and it crushes your dream. That if anybody hears that, that can really mess with somebody in a bad way. And I had it happen to me enough to where I was ready to say, okay, you know what? Obviously, writing is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So that I still remember when I went to work for you at Copywriter Today, when they asked for me to mail a picture of a voided check, I was like, uh-oh. So, I've already had a bad deal a couple of times, and I just went through with it, and that is really what started a regular income that I could depend on for writing.
Yeah, that's there are definitely a handful of people that push back and say, like, I'm not sending you, an ID and a voided check, and we obviously use that to verify that everybody's, the rights for us is here in the States, and so that we verify that we can deposit money to your account. So it's an important step. But I know how you feel with that, because there's been plenty of times in my life where I've been burned, and it makes me not want to trust anybody. So I guess it worked out okay, since you took a little leap of faith and decided to trust us, huh?
Yeah, that I learned a lot. One of the greatest things I probably learned through Copywriter Today, because that your company really has it together. You have your managers, you have your writers, you have your editors, and I can remember when the manager I had at the time told me, "You cannot be married to your words." She said, "I have nothing against you. I'm just editing this, and you have to let me do my job." So I took it as an insult when somebody would say, "Hey, this needs to be changed." I just took it as being told I'm not good enough, and that's not the case at all. So I learned a lot about the whole process, and there's one thing I loved working for Copywriter Today, is because I learned how to improve at what I was doing. Once I was willing to learn and willing to let someone teach me, I learned so much about writing as a career and not just a hobby.
Yeah. No, we definitely have, fortunately I've had some great mentors in my life that have taught me how to break down a business and systematize it and make it work. And it's really interesting to hear that from your perspective, because I'm always looking from the other side. So I'm glad to hear that it actually was helpful during that, during that time. Even, and I think you said something really interesting too, that when we're really like married to our work in a sense, or we're really passionate about what we're doing, it's easy to get offended when we're working for a client or working on a project or even just working with another partner. And they say like, well, we can't do that, or I don't like it. It's easy to tie your work into who you are. And there, in a sense, yes, it's a part of who we are, but it's just as important to realize that it's just work, and the situation may change, and you may not be doing that work anymore, and so it's not worth getting too emotionally involved in a single project. It's better to try to be objective, and I feel that way. To this day, I'm better at it, but I feel that way when somebody comes in and says like, oh, I want to tear this website down to the ground, or I don't like the approach that we're taking when I'm doing consulting for them or something like that. My gut reaction still is, to be offended. But finally, honestly, just in the last few years, I've gotten a little bit better about, taking the feedback and realizing that it's just a project. It doesn't make me who I am. So that's a good point for sure.
Yeah. And one of the big things when I started working for Copywriter Today, I really started listening to what was being said to me. And when I realized people weren't saying, you did this wrong, you need to change this, it was, hey, you know what? I think we could improve this. What do you think? And just that whole changing the way what was being said just made everything a better experience all around.
Yeah. And it's also another kind of thing you mentioned that was interesting too, which is not nice to hear your bad experience about people not paying you for writing, but it is nice to hear that the goal that I had when creating the whole model for the writer, the writing team, is that they would have consistent work and they would get paid every week, whereas you don't have to go out and chase, as an individual freelancer, chase a bunch of work, try to charge a high enough rate that makes up for the times when you don't get paid. So, it's good to hear that end of it worked, at least once you got to be on the team, because that's where I feel like writers miss out. Sometimes they have to charge a high rate because they're not working as frequently as they should be. So our goal is always to keep everything really consistent and keep everybody really busy. So that's interesting to hear from your side.
Yeah, and also that up until Copywriter, I'd spent probably 8 or 9 months trying to build up something as a freelancer. And I'm not willing to say I did anything wrong because I didn't know. I mean, like I said, I had no one else in my life to learn from. Mm-hmm. And it was just me. But going to work for Copywriter Today, that taught me how to be a contributing member of a team. And that's something that I still, even when I do projects on my own now, it's like I can see the process of everything. And that's something I learned from being part of a team that big.
Cool. What do you even, obviously you said like you started out just writing stuff for nonprofits and then you kind of tried on your own as a freelancer, and then you ended up with Copywriter Today for a while. Through kind of the ups and downs of it, and even when you were doing it for free or not making money or not making the money you should, what do you love about writing that keeps you doing it, or keeps you in it?
Writing it's the only way I know how to express myself. And for anybody hearing this thinking about a career in writing, that that it's your advertisement on Facebook that got my attention. Do you love to write? Do you want to work for us? I love to write. Writing was everything to me. When I would meditate, writing was involved. When I'd pray, writing was involved. I have a not newborn daughter anymore, but she's about 16 months old. I write her a letter every night. Writing was everything to me. So when I started getting paid for it, it started to lose its passion a little bit. When something's important to you and then you start doing it, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, it's hard to then get off work and then do it some more for personal growth.
Yeah.
So it can be tricky sometimes. It's just something, writing, you have to love it, period. It's not one of those things you learn to do. And I've got buddies who will talk to me about wanting to be a writer and going to school. And my experience, which is just me, this might not apply to anyone else, I think going to school to learn how to write is the worst thing someone could ever do. I mean, you can either write and you're good at it, or you can't. There's some people just got to realize writing is never going to be more than a great hobby.
Yeah.
So you can't teach somebody, because when you write, someone's investing in you. They're spending their time reading what you've written, and you have to connect with. If you can't connect with them, that's something you don't learn sitting at a desk. You can either use the words they want to hear, or you can't.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a point where it goes from like a technical skill or an ability to a passion. I know that for myself too. I definitely understand what you're saying about like you can either write or you can't. But the only thing I would disagree on is that I feel like I couldn't write until I was 28 or 29. And I can now, and so and I just kind of beat my head against the wall trying to be an average writer at best, and then I finally broke through. And the breakthrough point, which you kind of just alluded to, actually was when I just decided to let go and not care what people thought, and I just really wrote from the heart. And once I kind of unlocked that power source or that passion or whatever you want to call it, that's from that point on, I could sit down and I could write 12 hours straight. You know, there's more inside of me than I ever imagined. And you know, and you're right. Like when you sit down to write and you're connecting with somebody one to one, and they're going to sit down and read that, and they're either going to feel who you are and like really get the message, or it's going to be so dry and boring and rough that they'll never finish reading this, you know, third sentence. So
yeah, I have some of my greatest thoughts reading boring stuff. So,
maybe that's good for you.
So, I mean, it's all about keeping somebody's attention.
Yeah, that's for sure. So yeah, and like you said too, like once you start getting paid for something, it really takes on a different, you know, element of your life too, because then like your love or your passion or what you thought you wanted to do for a living, all of a sudden you actually have to work at every day. It takes on a whole different, you know, perspective at that point for sure. So it makes you, it's like when you take your art form usually kind of starts out as your hobby, I feel like. And then when somebody commissions you to actually do it on a daily basis, then you learn to actually do the work to be able to put out great work every day and not just be inspired, you know? So
yeah. And that is one of the greatest things I've ever learned. And I think I saw it on an Abraham Lincoln quote on Facebook or something, but it always stuck with me. It said, write out of routine, not out of inspiration. That if your writing depends on being inspired, you're never going to accomplish anything.
That's for
but
sure.
When I said, okay, you know what? Every day I'm going to write from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. every day. You just develop that routine, and it helps it become more natural.
Yeah. And the other great thing about it too is that it doesn't matter if, you know, for anybody listening, it doesn't matter if you think you're the most horrible writer in the world. Writing is hands down the most therapeutic thing you could ever do for yourself. I mean, I don't think I've ever done anything, you know, meditation or exercise or be involved, you know, spiritually or religiously with other activities. They're all good. But when it comes down to it, if you sit down and just journal or write a little bit every day, even if it's stuff you never read again or stuff that you never share with anybody, there is nothing better, you know, from a therapeutic kind of mental standpoint in my experience. So
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I learned, I think, once I got to where I was journaling about everything. I mean, and everybody will go buy these nice, expensive journals from Books A Million. I would just go to the dollar store. I knew the yellow notebooks I wrote in before bed. The red notebooks I wrote in when I woke up. And I learned to start dating everything.
mm-hmm.
That way I could see how I was improving. I could see how my writing style was changing, how my voice was changing as a writer. And that is the best way to learn.
Awesome. So yeah, so obviously, I I think you started like in early 2016 with us. I don't remember exactly when it was. Um, maybe you remember. I forgot to look it up here before, but
I
you
think
were
it was the end of May of last year.
okay. Yeah.
Sometime in May, I believe.
And then so you were on for a little while, and I know you were cranking out a bunch of work because your manager um was sounding like, hey, this Jeffrey guy's doing great. I love working with him. He turns stuff around. He's always around, always available. And then I remember it being a short time later that I got the call that your contract was about to be ended with us, and I was kind of surprised. So tell me about kind of like what happened there, and then maybe what you kind of what you ended up having to do next, or what you learned in that early part of that situation.
For me, I guess I'm lucky because I know exactly what went wrong. It's the same thing that's went wrong for a lot of my adult life. Everybody has their demons, and for me, that demon's alcohol. And when I drink, drinking becomes the most important thing in my life. And work doesn't get done. Work When I drink, work doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Work just gets in the way of my buzz. So it I had built something really good. I didn't build anything really good. I just took advantage of a really good opportunity. And once I started drinking again, I forgot that. I felt entitled. I knew the manager liked me and liked my work. And some reason I forgot I forgot about all those years that I was getting ripped off writing, and drinking was most important, flat out. It doesn't matter how you look at it. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and alcohol ruined something that really meant a lot to me.
Yeah. I think no matter what, for any entrepreneur out there, even anybody starting up that's brand new at something, that if we're honest, like you're being, there's usually something that we look back in our past, like you said, we all have our demons, and we all have these, things that if we let get out of hand, they can ruin a good thing. It can be, it can be an addiction to alcohol. It can be, a poisonous bad relationship that we, aren't dealing with correctly. Or it can honestly even be working too much, because when you actually overwork and are workaholic, you can also destroy your company and your relationships and everything. I've tried that before too. Um, so
Yeah,
it's definitely easy for anybody to get into that situation, whatever their kind of weakness is. And like I said, I was a little bit surprised, but I looked at what was going on and looked at some of the lack of performance, and I told your manager, I said, yeah, let's end it. One thing I hate doing, but I'm pretty decisive on in in most cases, is like when we decide to fire somebody or end the contract with them, then that's that, and I move on, because I unfortunately, as much as I would like to, I can't do anything about you know anybody else's situation. Just like in that moment, I could have told you, hey, whatever you got going on personally is screwing up your work here. You probably couldn't have heard it in the moment. So I usually just don't don't get that involved with it
yeah,
anymore. So
yeah, yeah. And I can remember, uh, and I don't want to give the wrong idea. It's not like something happened once and everything was over. I mean, it'd been building up for several weeks.
yeah,
And I can remember that Friday night. I remember thinking it's cool. Austin gave an email on Monday, and I
yeah,
think that email Monday, and it was, what, that email really got to me. That I think that's when you started investing into me a lot as a person, and you started going out of your way to start teaching. I think the whole time I worked at Copywriter Today, I could probably count on one hand how many times I actually talked to you. And then after I was honest about some stuff going wrong, and that's what really got my attention, is no, you weren't interested in having me as an employee. It wasn't going to benefit your company whatsoever, but you were interested in me as a person. And that just, that meant a lot more than all the money I had made working for Copywriter Today.
One thing that I tried to do a lot more of last year is when we fired people or ended relationships, or even in the the few cases where we have to fire customers, which is never fun either. I decided that I really wanted to be more graceful and at least try to give a fair explanation. It never changed my mind. I mean, nobody ever came back and convinced me that, like just in your case, I was like, obviously you can't do the work, and so that would hurt the rest of the team. And my job is to protect my team and our customers. And I think that's probably what I put in the email too. But
Yeah.
But I realized, which has been a slow realization, unfortunately, for other people in my life, but I've realized slowly over time that I'd much rather just be graceful and, do what I can to support and take care of other people, even in the moment of, firing them or talking about the fact that they can't come back. And so I'm glad it meant something, because I do care about everybody I work with, even if I do have to let them go, and I've also realized that, of the, I don't know, 50 or 100 firings I've done over almost 20 years of being an entrepreneur, they all suck. But I've realized that for people that are willing to learn and grow, it's actually the best thing I can do for them, because they get kind of put back on their heels and think about what happened and what they could do next. And for the people that aren't going to learn and grow, it's best anyway, because it's just time to part ways, and I can't deal with that poison in my company anymore. Because it's so anyway, I've just genuinely tried to be more gracious and kind during that process, because I think that's how I would want to be treated, in the same situation. I try to be a little bit more mindful of that, because as an arrogant young kid, I don't think I'd thought like that, and it's about time that I do.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty interesting situation, which we'll get to here in a minute, that we are, having you on the podcast and actually working together on a few different things too, which I'll share my kind of perspective on a little bit. But kind of just to take it from there, obviously, your steady income and good writing job was gone. What happened next? Because I'll just share, like, from my perspective, I was like, well, that was too bad. And if I can help them or give them some advice, I happily will. And I think I put something like that in the email. But then in a matter of, I feel like it was a very short time, I felt like we were still Facebook friends and we chatted here and there, and you were asking me some questions about things, but I felt like you got on your feet and figured out what was going on and what you needed to do pretty quickly. And I started just witnessing a pretty dramatic change in what I saw was going on in your life.
I towards the end, when I got fired, I was back here in Florida, where I've always done best at in life, especially when it comes to staying sober. And I was back here at that point, and it just, that copywriter was a good deal, and that was gone. And so it was like I woke up and it was, back to, I've got to find work if I want to eat. So
Yep.
I had been doing some sports writing on the side. The last month I'd worked at Copywriter Today. And at that point, I wasn't even getting paid for it yet. I had started writing for a site through fansided.com. They actually had me contributing to two of their sites. The Cubbies Crib, which centered around Chicago Cubs, and then another site that focused on all Chicago's sports teams. And I think within a matter of 10 days, I had 3 articles featured on sportsillustrated.com that had been written for one of those websites. And so then, of course, it just, I had something to go off of. That was a huge accomplishment as a sports writer.
Yeah.
And so I started applying for different sports writing positions. And as soon as I could provide them a link to sportsillustrated.com with my name on it, I got to pick what job I wanted. So,
Nice.
yeah. And I made a mistake. Again, I can tell you everything what not to do. I'm really good at that. But if anybody is wanting to get in sports writing, I would think about it a long time, because that is definitely the most demanding writing work I've ever done. But no matter how good or bad things get with one website, just stay there. I got to be on SportsIllustrated.com a couple times, BleacherReport.com, Yahoo Sports. I mean, I was blessed. I got to do some major things within a month where there was kind of like a demand. So every time a website offered more money, I went to another website. And I learned the goal as a sports writer, like, say if we get off here, if you looked up Chicago Cubs, pulled up 4 different websites covering the Cubs, all 3 of the top stories are going to be the same on every website. There's no different news for different websites. It's all whose words come across best to the audience. Mm-hmm. And I learned the goal is, instead of having a viewer go to a website looking for a specific team, you want a viewer going to a website looking for you as an author. And that doesn't happen when you're jumping from one website to the next.
That's a good point.
I was making more and more money, but the only thing being recognized was the website. There was no recognizing Jeffrey as a writer at all. So it's kind of like it was all about money. There was no more passion. There was no more any of that.
And you were sounds like you kind of effectively diluted your personal brand just by going after the money.
Exactly. And it all ended. Well, it didn't end. I mean, I just wrote a couple articles for the podcast, but what I'm doing right now, there's great money in, but I'm writing previews and predictions on gambling websites for handicapping sporting games, which is totally different. I guarantee nothing I wrote today will be on SportsIllustrated.com. So maybe 5 Dimes or Odd Shark, but not what the original goal was.
Yeah. So
because it all became about money, and that's the direct result.
Yeah. I have a couple kind of questions around that. How was there anything like specific you think you did, or I mean, to get on Sports Illustrated and Yahoo and Bleacher Report as fast as you did? I mean, that's unheard of. So what was there anything specific that you did that got you there, or do you think it was luck? Is it your writing style? Did you have connections? Or I mean, how did that happen?
The Fan-Sided Network, who I first started writing with, they are an affiliate partner of Sports Illustrated. So it's pretty common, actually. But then the other sites, such as Bleacher Report and Yahoo Sports, they noticed, and they started having the articles I would write for Cover32.com and one of the Fan-Sided sites. They would have featured on their websites also. Nice. And actually, when I first found out about it, I didn't even know. I went to SportsIllustrated.com to get an idea for a story because, like I said, news and sports is very limited. Everybody covers the same thing. It's just who writes it better. Yep. And I went to the Sports Illustrated site to get an idea for an article, and there was my article. So that's how I found out.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but the biggest thing for me was like you would join a team on fansided.com and you just hopefully you end up with a good manager who has good scheduling and all that. And normally they're asking you to contribute at least 2 articles a week. I just said, hey, why don't you let me do 1 or 2 a day? Because I wasn't working the copywriter anymore. I had some little freelance work going on. I had time to contribute 1 or 2 articles a day. And the more you put out there, because that was the difference with sports, everything has your name on it. There's a lot of freelance writing work that you're never going to be able to tie to your own name.
Yeah.
But with sports, I could do that. And the more I got my name out there, the more opportunities I had.
That's pretty simple. Yeah, that makes sense then, because if you're willing to work harder and do more than anybody else, it's easier to rise to the top. That's for sure.
Yes.
So so I know you got super busy and made a bunch of money. How much were you making when you were writing? Like at your busiest point, how many articles were you writing a day, and how much were you making a week?
I didn't really start making real money until I started writing the game previews for the gambling site. But once I started doing that, you can make up to 15. You know what? I made $1,500 a week once, and I would never ever do that again. The time that I had to spend, we're talking writing 16, 17 hours a day.
Yikes.
And there's, of course, research involved, because at that time, a lot of that work was hockey, and there's hockey teams play every other night. So stats change. Like I said, sports is the most demanding writing work I've ever had to do.
So you made good money, but it sounds like, and I know we were talking about back then, it got to be too much where you didn't really care how much money you were making because you were just working too many hours.
I'll tell you what, I still have not watched TV since December 16th. I have not watched any sport. It got to where I hated sports, because that was from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed. That's what it was writing about sports. So, and another thing, if you're one of those people who like to use the online gambling sites, which there's nothing wrong with that, just be careful, because my specialty is NHL hockey. I've got an amazing record at predicting winners. I'm featured in NHL writer on a couple websites, and I've never watched a hockey game in my life. So be careful with who you bet on. So,
that's pretty interesting point right there.
Yeah.
So it's all just a stats prediction,
huh? Yeah. If you can read stats and figure averages, you can determine who's going to win a game 7 times out of 10.
Wow.
So
that's interesting.
Yes. So.
Yeah, I always tell people I'm not lucky in gambling. I'm more lucky in business, even though I've had my downside. So I don't gamble a whole lot, but it's a pretty. Yeah. I have friends that are professional gamblers, and it's very interesting to me. And you're right. It's all numbers. It's all stats, and you got to take all. Just like any successful business or career, honestly, I feel like you got to be able to moderate your emotions or take them out of the scenario completely in order to do well. So.
Yeah, well, like I said, I just right before this, I wrote an article on tomorrow's Xavier versus Butler college basketball game, and like I said, I haven't watched TV, any sports, ESPN, nothing since the middle of December, and there's a good chance I'm going to hit on that game.
Wow. That's crazy.
So yeah, so.
Well, yeah. So, it sounds like you kind of had a busy period. At least you were keeping busy and hopefully staying out of trouble and making money. But I know, I forget I know we were kind of chatting, and you had even asked me, like we talked before we started here, that you asked me how to, start a podcast. You did some podcasting on sports, you did some writing, and you would reach out for questions periodically. But like what kept you reaching out, or what kept you asking for help, or what kind of ultimately led you back to where you were comfortable, working with me again? A lot of people I don't think are willing to do that after they've been let go from a position. So what kept you kind of, doing that?
I have somebody who is very close to me, a mentor in my life, not regarding business or anything, just overall learning how to be a man. And he always told me, Jeffrey, if you're the only teacher you have, you are never going to learn anything new. And every time I had a conversation with you, I learned something. It got to a point where I knew we were going to talk. I'd be ready to take notes because I always learned something. And that, I mean, for me, that just attracts me to people. If you can teach me something that is going to add value to my life in some way, shape, or form, then you are someone I want to be close to, regardless of who it is, what you're doing. I don't care about your past. If you can make me a better person by teaching me something, you're the kind of person I want in my life. And every time you and I would talk, I would learn.
That's very good. I'm glad to hear that and honored to hear that. It's good. I've had some pretty amazing people teach me, so I better be able to teach something. But
well,
yeah. So, well, I think that's good. I think that kind of gives people some good background and kind of where you've gone and what what you learned and what's been working for you. What's really interesting. This is definitely this is definitely one of the first times, if not the first time, like I mentioned earlier, that this has happened. I kind of watched, you be growing and figuring out sports writing, and you were doing a podcast, and I saw, just kind of how you were getting your life on track, watching on Facebook, and we had talked a few times. And so, I really took a lot of time to think about this because I've never done this before, but I was like, you know what? I think that Jeffrey has figured out whatever he had going on, and I see that he's growing. And the biggest thing I noticed is that you were teachable, and you had a good attitude. And so I decided to reach out and say, hey, do you want to be involved in this new company that we're starting up, which is your resume builder? So I, from my side, I was really excited that you said yes and that you wanted to be involved, because I feel like I'm like you. I don't really care what happened in your past per se, as long as you kind of handled it and got over it and moved forward and made good decisions to get beyond it. Because I have done some incredibly stupid things in my life too. But what I noticed about you is that you could learn and figure it out, and you could correct mistakes, and that your desire to be successful and learn from your mistakes is probably one of the strongest I've ever seen. And you're very unique in being able to be humble and not be worried about the bad things that happened before. And so I really respect that about you. And so I was like, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? If it doesn't work out, he knows how that goes. No, but I felt like, I feel like this is a really good bet, because I think that I'll learn and grow out of it. And I know that you'd put your whole heart into it, because that's what I really saw. I saw that you just buried yourself into whatever you were focusing on to be successful on. And so, I was like, all right, well, if there's somebody I want to be involved helping me grow the new company, that it was you. And so like I said, I did something I've never done before. I, repartnered with or rehired somebody that I had fired previously. But I felt like, I just really felt, in my gut that it was going to be a good decision. And I mean, I can't tell you, so far it's been fantastic. We're only into it barely a month or something now, of actually talking about it and getting started. But I'm super excited to see what you do with the project and, with me and the team that we're building there. So it's been exciting. So I appreciate you giving me a chance too, because like I said, it's a firing goes both ways sometimes. So it's been nice to develop a friendship with you and also just partner on all this stuff.
Yes. And it's something I still remember the day you asked me to get involved, because, I'd been up all night writing. I think I probably went to bed like 10 minutes before you sent the message. So several hours later, I saw it, and I was very excited about the opportunity. And I guess you get to a point where you just lose so much in life that opportunities start meaning a little more.
Yeah.
And so, yes, if I get involved with anything, it's 100% or nothing.
Yep. That's definitely the way to find success. So before we wrap up here, is there any kind of parting advice you'd give anybody that's trying to start out on their own or get their business started or kind of, take this path of kind of being more entrepreneurial?
The most valuable thing that I've learned is just what I said a couple minutes ago. Put people in your life. If you're the smartest person in your group, then that group's going nowhere quick. Period. Regardless of what you're doing or what your goals are, you've got to have people in your life that are going to teach you how to do what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. That is good advice. There's somebody says that, I don't remember who quoted it, but it's just along the lines of just like you're saying that, if you want to be successful, find somebody who's actually successful in that area and model what they're doing, and make sure it's somebody legitimate, that legitimately has been successful for a long time, not the flash in the pan, overnight wonders that you don't hear about again, but people that you can see that have been doing it for decades. So that's great advice. Well, I appreciate you being on with us today, Jeffrey. I'm sure you'll be back on a future episode as we talk more about our new business, your resume builder, and appreciate you sharing and taking the time with us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to next time.
Are you looking to get started successfully? Today I want to invite you to join the Start Successfully Mastermind group. You can check it out by going to startsuccessfully.com/mastermind. There, I'll share all the details with you, and you can give it a try for just $1 for the first week. Inside the group, I'll share with you all the templates, all the details and strategies and everything that I'm doing to build out the new businesses that I'm working on, and you'll also get insider strategies and tips from our guests. So go ahead and check it out, startsuccessfully.com/mastermind, and we'll see you on the inside.
Thanks for listening to the Start Successfully podcast. To connect with Gabe Arnold or with our guests and resources from today's show, please visit startsuccessfully.com.